As you can see, they're disabled. When I close, only the play button is enabled again, and we get money. Perfect. If I watch an ad, and it's unskippable, once I close the advertisement, I resume playthrough. Hi, I'm Ricky. Today we're on the 15th episode of the Endless Runner series, and in this episode we'll take a look on how to implement advertisement to our game. We will do this using the Unity Ad system, which recently got updated and now it's easier than ever to use. First we integrate the Unity Ad system, then we make a reward video in the shop that will give the player some extra gold if they watch an ad, and then we make a second chance advertisement so that when player loses a game, they can watch a video to get an extra life. And we're also going to make an interstitial ad that plays whenever the player loses a certain amount of games in a row. This tutorial series is based on a game that I've already made and published called BoatVenture. You can play BoatVenture for free on the Play Store for all Android devices 9+. Alright, so let's start. To use Unity Ads, we have to use the Services tab. And if you haven't already, you have to make a Unity account and log in into your account. You can make a Unity account for free, link in the description, and then you can log in from this tab right here. Once you have done that, you will have this tab available, and in here we just go to Ads and activate it. Unity is going to download some assets for us and import them and install them automatically. Just make sure you have the same settings as I have. Also, while installing, it may happen that the ads get turned off. Just make sure that they're turned on afterwards. Okay, we can close the Services tab. And now let's make our script to handle ads, and we'll call this Ad Manager. Let's also make a new empty game object in our Managers tab, and let's add the script that we just made. In here, let's make a new private function called WatchAd. And to actually watch an ad, we have to go through two steps. First, we need to know if an advertisement is ready, and then we need to tell it which advertisement to show. To do this, we have to use the Unity Engine.Advertisement library. And in our WatchAd function, we ask if advertisement is ready, advertisement.show. And that's the main idea. Advertisement.ready checks whether the user has an internet connection and if an ad is ready to show, while advertisement.show actually shows the ad. And if you don't put any value for these functions, we are going to show a default video. If you actually want to choose which ad to show, we have to go to our Unity account. In here, make sure you are logged in with your account and go to Projects. And in here, you can see all your projects. In my case, I'm going to go to Test YouTube Runner, and now I can watch the overview of my project. Your view could be a little different, but what you really need to do is go to Advertisement, and in here, go to Monetization, Placements. By default, Unity is going to give you two ad videos that you can already use. We can click on them to modify them, and you can see all the options you can change. We can change whether the ad can be skipped and after how long one can skip it. We can choose whether the audio is muted, what type of video it shows, stuff like that. What we need is the placement ID. We can copy it to the clipboard, and now in our Unity script, we can tell it which ad to show using this placement ID. Let's go back. If you don't put anything in your instructions, we're just going to show the default video, so a skippable video. If you want to watch another ad, we can make another placement, or we can use the already in use rewarded video. In our case, we want to give a reward to the player when he watches an ad. So we don't want the ad to be skippable. So in this case, we want to show a rewarded video. And we're just going to use the Unity's default for that. So I'm going to copy to the clipboard, and I'm going to go back to Visual Studio. And in here, when we check when the advertisement is ready and we want to show, we feed in as a string or rewarded video ID. Of course, we don't want to use a string two times, so instead let's make a private const string. And let's use that value. And this way, when we're going to watch an ad, we're going to watch a rewarded video. Let's say you want to put also an interstitial ad, so an advertisement that you can skip. Let's give us the option to choose which ad to show. So let's add a Boolean parameter to our function called isItRewarded. Then when we start the function, we make an empty string. And if the Boolean is rewarded is true, then we change the string to the rewarded video. And finally, instead of rewarded video, we put video ID. Also, one thing, we can simplify this bit of code here with one single line of code, and that is called a ternary operator. what we can do is declare this value and change it to however we want within the same line. To do that, let's first comment out this. What this does is it creates a value and then it checks a boolean, and if that boolean is true, then the original value is set to this value. If the boolean is false, then the string is set to the second value. It looks a bit weird if you've never used it and even complicated. Don't be ashamed of using the longer version if you want to, but I'm just gonna comment it out just to show you that this is another way you can do it. Alright, so now we have an option to choose whether we want a skippable video or a rewarded video. One other thing that we need to is making sure that our advertisement actually shows. Now what I mean by that is that on computer, on my Unity editor, Unity doesn't even check if you have an interconnection, it just shows an ad and that's it. Or rather, it shows an example of what an ad will be like. But when you are on mobile, the interconnection may shift a little bit, it may be offline on that precise moment when you ask for an ad, and it's not going to show anything because of it. What we want to do, instead of asking for an advertisement only once, is sending repeated requests to the server within a certain period of time. So let's change this function from void to a coroutine. And let's put this bit of code in a while loop. And to break from while loop, let's make a new value equal to 0 and add to it until it reaches 10. Then at the end we wait for a quarter of a second. And do note that we don't need scale time, so use seconds in real time. Because let's say we are pausing the game or we are at the game over, if a time scale is set to 0, we want to use seconds in real time. And then if we manage to show an ad, we just break from the loop manually. Perfect. Okay, and now let's make a public function to call this watch ad. And the reason is we could just make this coroutine public and call it from other scripts, but a coroutine, when it's public, it can also be called without the start coroutine. Now I want to make a new public function to call this coroutine within this same script. You can call a coroutine even without the start coroutine prefix, and that's gonna mess things up because the script doesn't even realize that it's a mistake. So I'd rather make a public function that calls this coroutine and then use that public function from other scripts to call an advertisement. Great. Now last thing, let's make a singleton or ad manager. And that's it. Now let's see if it works in Unity. I'm gonna duplicate the add money button and change the function just to see if it works. Now we've put the boolean to false, so now when I press the ad, you can see that we can skip the video if you want to, while if I put the boolean to true, it shows an unskippable video. We don't have the skip option here. So that works. Okay, and for the next part of the video, we're gonna make a button that shows the player an advertisement if they want to, and when they are finished watching it, they're gonna get some extra money. So I've duplicated the debug add money button, and I'm just gonna change the name. And I'm also gonna replace the position with the add money button. And the debug add money button is something that we only use right now in the editor and on mobile, but only when we are testing a game. We are of course gonna disable it when we build the game for real. So it doesn't matter if it looks weird right now. Okay, and now for the actual event to happen, so to actually get some money to the player, let's make a new script. And I'm gonna call the script watch ad for money. In here, let's make a function called watch reward ad for money. And in here, we call the ad managers function. And we also say that it's true, as in it is a rewarded video. Now what we want to do is have a function to trigger when we finish watching that video. That is a callback. Now to have callbacks, let's go to our ad manager. And in our advertisement.show, we want to add a show options. Show options is a class that allows for callbacks when watching advertisements. And to implement the show option class, for now let's just implement it as a parameter, and I'll explain later how to use it. We can then take this class and put it when we show an ad to add the callbacks. One last thing though, in case we don't have an internet connection, we can't manage to get one before the while runs out, what we want to do is call the callback function and give it a manual failed result. To do that, at the end of the script, we just put this line here. So we're just calling the show options result, we call the callback, and we say invoke, so we activate the function that is loaded, and we say that the result is failed. We know it's failed because we failed to get an advertisement, we failed to get an internet connection. One thing though, in this case the function will run twice, because in here we have a break that breaks from the while loop, but we aren't breaking from the entire function. And we can't use return to stop the function because we are in an enumerator. So to return from an enumerator, what you have to do is use yield break. There we go. And now we are fail-safe for everything. And now let's go back to our watch ad for money class. In here we want to make a new instance of a show options class, give it a callback, and then feed that options class to our function. To do that, we need to import the Unity Engine advertisement library. A callback is nothing more than a function that is called after a certain requirement. So let's make a new function to call after the user has watched the video, and that is give the player money. So now in options, we say options.result callback equal and the function we want to call. And this works much like an event or a delegate, and that is we don't need to use the brackets because we aren't actually calling the function, we're just assigning it. As you can see, it gives us an error though because this isn't an event, it's an action, as you can see here by the snippet. And an action to be assigned needs to have a specific parameter. In this case, and it's telling us it's show result. So the function you want to call, it must have a show result parameter. Show result is an enum that tells us whether the advertisement that we just watched was finished, was skipped, or it failed loading. When we deal with advertisement, we always want to know how the advertisement has ended. That's why we must put a show result parameter when we assign the function. Finally, let's add the option class to our function. Okay, and now in the give the player ad money function, we can say if the advertisement was finished, then give the player some money. To add the money, I'm going to call the player money instance add money and save, and then I'm going to update the shop UI. For the amount of money to give to the player, I'm going to put a variable. I would like to put a variable amount so that when the game goes on, if you have progressed enough, then the amount of money that you get from watching an ad increases. I think it's a nice touch. Okay, so this way we give money to the player, and we save it directly into a player pref, then we update the shop UI, and of course we can also add a little animation, a sound effect if we want to, but for now we're just going to keep it like that and see how it looks in Unity. Let's add the script to our ad manager, and let's change the function of the watch ad button. We're going to call the watch ad for money and say watch your ad for money. Now I have a 608 call. I watch an ad and the amount is still the same, but once I close the advertisement, then I get the extra money. Pretty good. Instead, if I watched the advertisement, but then I close the game, so I fail to watch it completely, and then I play again, you can see that I still have the same exact amount of money. Perfect. Now, as I've said before, advertisements don't always load immediately. One bad thing that could happen is the player tries to watch an advertisement, it doesn't load, and then goes to play mode. And then when it goes to play mode, the advertisement actually shows up and the gameplay is stopped because of it. Of course, we want to avoid that because it could also mess up with the natural gameplay of the game. What we want to do is block users' input while an advertisement is showing. We could make a blocking panel, so a panel on top of everything that blocks the input touches, but I think that's pretty invasive. Instead, what you can do is just block the buttons we don't want the player to press. So in this case, we want to block the play button and the watch ad button while an advertisement is loading. So let's go to our watch reward ad for money class and let's add some references to these two buttons. Then, when we want to watch an ad, we just make these two buttons uninteractable, and when the advertisement has finished loading, we make it interactable again. One thing though, I don't want the player to be able to spam the advertisement and to get as much money as he wants. So in this case, I want to make the play button interactable false and then interactable true when the advertisement has finished loading. But I want to make the watch ad for money button uninteractable at the start and not enable it back at the end. This way the player is forced to play a game before each advertisement, so it doesn't spam the watch ad button. Of course, they can always just close the game to get it back on, but that at least disincentivizes them from doing it. One thing though, in case we don't have an internet connection, so we don't watch an ad, the callback result will be failed. So we haven't watched an ad, we haven't got a reward, but the watch button is still uninteractable. So let's change it, and to do that, let's see if the result is fail, and if it is, we make the watch ad for money button interactable again. Okay, so let's assign the values and test it. As you can see, they're disabled. When I close, only the play button is enabled again, and we get money. Perfect. Okay, for the next part of the video, we're gonna make a second chance type of advertisement. That is, when we lose the game, we are given the opportunity to watch an ad, and if we do, we get an extra life. It's gonna be a lot easier to do since we already have the foundation, so let's go do it. I'm gonna hide the shop panel for a moment, and I'm gonna go in the game over panel. In here, I'm gonna duplicate the restart button, and I'll call it second chance button. I've renamed it to watch ad to continue. I've also moved it a bit, and now I'm gonna make a new class called watch ad for second chance. In here, we can just copy watch ad for money and change a few things. So we don't want an extra amount of money to give to a player, and we still want true button to disable, but we're gonna change the names. And just like for watch ad to get money button, we don't want the player to be able to watch multiple ads to be saved every time. So we're only gonna enable again the game over button, that is the play again. Also this function, we're gonna call it give player second chance. And instead of giving money to the player, we want to resume playthrough. To do that, let's go grab our boat collision script and let's make a new function. In here, I'm gonna make a new public void function called second chance. And what we want to do is just add a life to our boat and activate the unlost life without losing coroutine. Finally, let's go to watch ad for second chance and call that function. When we lose the game, the timescale is also set to 0, but because in our boat collision we have a function that gives the player a certain animation, the timescale is going to be set to 1 thanks to that animation. That being said though, it's better if we also change the timescale to 1 right here, because let's say we change that function in our boat collision, we want to make sure that the timescale is set to a natural value. Okay, let's also make a reference to the game over panel because we want to close it when the advertisement is finished and we resume playthrough. And we're going to disable this game over panel when the advertisement has been finished. Also, I forgot, but let's also change the name of this function. Instead of a watch reward ad for money, I'm going to call it watch reward ad to get extra chance. Great. Now let's go to Unity, let's assign the values, and let's see how it looks. Okay, so now I have 1 life, and as soon as I touch a rock, if I watch an ad, and it's unskippable, once I close the advertisement, I resume playthrough. And I also have 1 life now. Pretty good. But if I touch a rock again, you can see that the button is not interactable, so we can't just spam the advertisement to keep playing. Perfect. Okay, for the final part, let's make it so that the player watches an ad whenever he loses a certain amount of times. This is called an interstitial ad, so a type of advertisement video that is skippable and happens at transitional moments, like when loading a level or after losing a life. There are a lot of ways to improve on this type of design. Personally, I don't really like interstitial ads. I prefer the rewarded type of videos where the player chooses to watch an advertisement. But interstitial ads is something I should learn anyway, so let's make a new class. And I'm gonna call this class watch ad when losing. Okay, and in here we're gonna make a boolean function that tells our finish game manager whether we're gonna watch an ad or restart the game. And then we're gonna make a function that actually calls the ad manager to show our ad. So let's start with the boolean function. And in here the criteria is gonna be how many games we have lost in a row. So we're gonna make a new int value. And by default, I'll set it to 4. And now when we call this boolean, we are gonna call a player pref that tells how many games in a row we have lost and increase it by 1. We then check that value and see if it's equal or major to this value. So let's make a new private const string for our player pref. Let's then get to this value and add 1 to it. And save it. Then we check whether games lost is major or equal to how many games to lose. And if it's so, we return true, else we return false. And when we return true, we want to watch an advertisement, so let's make the function to call our ad manager. And let's also reset the player pref when we do. And in here, it's going to be very similar to the previous cases. So we make the show options, then we add a callback, then we call the ad manager. In this case, we set the boolean to false because it's a skippable ad, while for the callback, we are going to make a new function called onWatchInterstitialAd. We don't actually need a show result for this function, but the result callback needs the function to have a show result, so let's add it. In here, we want to call the finish game manager, and we call the restart game function. Now, our should player watch interstitial ad, it's actually going to be a public function, and we're going to call this function in our finish game manager to check whether we are going to restart the game or watch an advertisement. To do that, let's make a new public function called check if player can restart the game. In here, we call the watch ad when losing function, and we save it into a boolean. But to do that, we first have to make a singleton. Then, if the value is false, we restart the game. Finally, let's go back to Unity. And in our restart button, instead of calling the finish game manager a restart game, we call the finish game manager check if player can restart game. And let's see how it looks. I'm gonna set the value to 1. And when I hit a rock and hit play again, you can see that I'm shown an ad that I can skip. Instead, if I put a value of say 2 and I hit a rock, but on the second time, I'm shown an ad. Perfect. Alright, so that's it for this video. Hope you've learned something new. If you have any doubts about the code or any suggestions about our next topic that you'd like to see, do tell me in the comments. And if you like this content, please like and subscribe. In the next video, we're gonna make a new enemy, and that is a shark, a type of enemy that bounces on and off from the screen. So stay tuned, and I'll see you in the next video.